You're a squatter, and in 48 hours, you'll be off this land. HO President Karen Whitmore stood inside my gate with 3 attorneys behind her and an eviction notice in her hand. My family has owned this property since 1926, I said. Karen laughed. Your grandfather farming here doesn't make you the owner. She slapped the notice against my chest. We have attorneys. We have county filings. You have an old farmhouse and a pickup truck. One of her lawyers stepped closer. Karen, we should wait until the title review is complete. She cut him off. No, I'm done letting this man waste our time. Then a sheriff's SUV rolled through my gate. Karen smiled. Perfect. She marched toward it and pointed at me. Sheriff, that's the squatter. Remove him. Sheriff Hale stepped out, looked past her, and stopped. Good morning, Judge Bennett. Karen's smile vanished. Her lawyers lowered his eyes. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Karen recovered. Wonderful. She pulled a stamped document from her folder. Then the judge should understand what a recorded easement means. She shoved it toward me. I looked at the county seal, my father's signature, and a filing date from 1988. For the first time that morning, I said nothing. Karen smiled again. Not so confident now, Judge. I looked up at her. Because Karen actually had a recorded document. What she didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd already discovered the one sentence inside it that was going to destroy her entire claim. 3 weeks earlier, I was replacing a hinge on my front gate when a white Lexus drove straight past the private property sign. It stopped beside my barn. Karen Whitmore stepped out carrying a clipboard. 2 HA board members followed her. She looked at my muddy boots, faded work shirt, and old Ford. Are you the caretaker? No. Tina? No. She frowned. Then who are you? Daniel Bennett. I own this land. Karen looked around at the pasture and farmhouse. Then she smiled. That's not what our records show. She opened her clipboard and held up a color map. Nearly a third of my property was shaded blue. Across it were the words, Hawthorne Ridge, Future Development Area. I handed it back. That isn't a property record. It's the official HOA boundary map. Your boundary ends at Miller Creek. Karen's smile disappeared. Not anymore. My family has owned this property since 1926. She sighed. Daniel, owning something for a long time doesn't make you exempt from progress. Then she handed me a violation notice. Unauthorized fencing, unapproved agricultural structures, improper vehicle storage, non-compliant exterior materials. I looked at her. I'm not in your HOA. You're inside our revised boundary, according to your map, according to our attorneys. I pointed toward the gate. Then show me the recorded easement that gives you access to my property. One of the board members glanced at Karen. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. This community has more than 400 families. Their property values matter more than one man's sentimental attachment to an old barn. That barn belonged to my grandfather. Exactly. She smiled. You're emotionally involved. We're looking at the bigger picture. Then she turned toward her Lexus. Before getting in, she looked back. You should think about whether 97 acres is really practical for someone your age. I was 63. The HOA might even be willing to make you a fair offer. For land you just told me you already control? Her expression tightened. 10 days, Daniel. Fix the violations. She drove away. The next morning I found 6 orange stakes in my southern pasture. By noon there were 14. 2 men in reflective vests were measuring a line toward Miller Creek. I walked over. Who authorized you to survey my property? One checked his tablet. Hawthorne Ridge. For what? The new access road. I looked across my pasture. There is no access road. The contractor shrugged. There will be. That changed things. Karen wasn't just sending notices anymore. She was putting markers into my ground. I photographed every stake and asked for the contractor's work order. Then I drove to the county planning office. The clerk searched Hawthorne Ridge in the system. You're Daniel Bennett? Yes. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a thick planning file. The first page showed 48 new homes, a clubhouse, walking trails. Then I turned to the site plan, a proposed road cut directly across my southern pasture. Almost 30 acres were labeled HOA, Controlled Access and Development Corridor. I looked at the clerk. They don't control that land. She frowned. According to this application, they do. Who told you that? She turned to the certification page. At the bottom was one signature, Karen Whitmore. Present, Hawthorne Ridge HOA. I stared at it. Karen hadn't come to my property because of a fence. She hadn't come because of my barn. She needed my land. Then the clerk pulled another document from the file. Mr. Bennett, there's something else. She tapped the page. Hawthorne Ridge didn't tell us they planned to acquire this corridor. She looked at me. They certified that they already had the legal right to use it. I kept reading. Buried deeper in the planning file was an email from the developer. One sentence explained everything. Access through the Bennett parcel is essential. Without that corridor, Phase 4 is not financially viable. 48 luxury homes, a private clubhouse, a second entrance connecting Hawthorne Ridge to County Road 16. Without my southern pasture, there was no practical access. Now Karen's visit made sense. The violations, the boundary map, The survey stakes. She didn't care about my barn. She needed a road. I requested certified copies of everything and went home. 2 days later, 3 black SUVs came through my gate. Karen stepped out first. 3 attorneys followed her. This time she carried a leather folder. Daniel, we're here to give you one last opportunity to handle this reasonably. One attorney handed me a document. At the bottom was a number, $410,000. I looked at Karen. For my land? For a property you're clearly struggling to maintain. I looked at my freshly repaired fence. It isn't for sale, Karen sighed. Everything is for sale. Not this. Her expression hardened. You're 63 years old, Daniel. You live alone in an aging farmhouse on 97 acres. What exactly are you protecting? My property. No, she stepped closer. Memories. Then she looked toward my barn. Your family had its century. It's time this land became useful. One of her attorneys glanced at her. I didn't answer immediately. My father taught me to drive in that pasture. My grandfather built that barn. And Karen was standing on their land telling me its only value was whatever her developer could build on it. I handed the offer back. No, Karen didn't take it. Then this becomes expensive. How expensive? She smiled. More expensive than you can afford. One attorney opened another folder. Mr. Bennett, there is also a recorded access agreement affecting the southern portion of the property. That got my attention. He handed me a certified copy. August 17, 1988. At the bottom was my father's signature. For the first time, I stopped talking. Karen noticed. Her smile returned. There it is. I kept reading. She folded her arms. You've spent 3 weeks waving family history around like it's a legal argument. She tapped the document. That is a legal argument. The agreement was real. The county seal was real. My father's signature was real. Karen leaned toward me. Still want to tell me Hawthorne Ridge has no rights here? I want time to read it, she laughed. Take all the time you want. It's been recorded for almost 40 years. The next morning I took the agreement to the county planning office. I asked them to suspend Hawthorne Ridge's application. The answer wasn't what I wanted. Mr. Bennett, because there is a recorded agreement connected to the parcel, we can't simply disregard it. So they can keep planning a road across my land? Until the scope of the agreement is formally determined, the review stays open. For the first time, Karen had gained ground. When I got home, 2 more orange stakes had appeared beside Miller Creek. I sat at the kitchen table and read the agreement again. First page, second, third. Then I reached page 4 and stopped. The agreement did give the original developer access across Bennett land, but only during construction of the original Hawthorne Ridge subdivision. Then came the sentence Karen apparently hadn't bothered to read. Upon completion, rights terminate. I read it again. The original development had been completed decades ago. Karen had found a real document. She had simply built her entire claim on a right that no longer existed, and that wasn't even the worst problem buried in the county records. The expired agreement should have ended the argument. Instead, the next morning, a certified letter arrived. According to the HOA, I owed $18,600, back assessments, late fees, architectural penalties, legal expenses. They claimed I had ignored HOA obligations for 11 years. Then Karen called. I assume you received our demand. I did. Good. Maybe you're finally starting to understand how expensive stubbornness can be. The 1988 access agreement expired. A short silence. Then she laughed. Our attorneys disagree, do they? You're not a lawyer, Daniel. I almost smiled. No, I'm not. Her voice hardened. You have 2 choices. Take our offer or spend the next several years fighting an association with a legal budget you can't match. She paused. People like you think owning land makes you powerful. Then she said something I wrote down word for word. It doesn't. Power is being able to afford the fight. I looked at the county documents on my desk. Anything else? Yes. Her voice became almost patronizing. I never sign property documents until our attorneys verify ownership. So stop pretending you've discovered something our lawyers haven't already seen. That sentence mattered. Karen just didn't know it yet. After she hung up, I drove back to the county recorder's office and requested every Hawthorne Ridge filing connected to my parcel. Near the bottom of the file was an ownership search requested 8 months earlier. I opened it. Owner of record, Daniel R. Bennett. I checked the date. 8 months earlier. Karen had walked onto my land 3 weeks ago and asked if I was the caretaker. She already knew the answer. The report also referenced the 1988 agreement and another recorded document. Book 214, page 73. It was the agreement my father signed when he sold 20 acres to the original developer. The language was remarkably clear. The remaining Bennett property would not become subject to any present or future homeowners association. No HOA, assessments, no architectural authority, no automatic annexation, and no permanent access rights. Karen's association had received that information before any of this started. Then I laid out the timeline. First, the ownership search identifying me as owner. Then the developer's warning that Phase 4 required access through my property. Then Karen's certification claiming the HOA controlled that corridor. then the violations, then the offer, then the $18,600 demand. That wasn't a misunderstanding, it was leverage. For 27 years I'd watched attorneys destroy complicated stories with simple timelines. Dates don't get nervous, signatures don't change their testimony, and recorded documents don't care how confidently someone describes them. At 4:17 that afternoon my phone rang. One of Karen's attorneys. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes." His voice sounded different. "I reviewed book 214, page 73. And," a pause, "I think there are significant problems with the association's position." "I agree." Then he asked something unexpected. "Are you the Daniel R. Bennett who served on the county circuit court?" I looked at the framed photograph across my study. 27 years on the bench. Retired 18 months. Yes. Another silence. "Does Ms. Whitmore know that?" "No," he exhaled. "Then she needs to stop this." At that exact moment, someone knocked on my front door. A courier handed me an envelope from Hawthorne Ridge. I opened it while the attorney was still on the phone. "Final demand to vacate. 48 hours. I looked at Karen's signature. "She isn't stopping." "Mr. Bennett, don't do anything until I speak with her." I put the notice into my binder. "Counselor, I spent 27 years watching people ignore good legal advice." I closed it. "Your client just became one of them." 48 hours later, Karen arrived at 9 sharp. 3 attorneys came with her. So did 2 HOA, board members and a sheriff's deputy. Karen stepped through my gate holding the eviction notice. "Time's up, Daniel." I stayed where I was. One of her attorneys moved beside her. "Karen, before we proceed, I strongly recommend we wait." She raised one hand. "No. There's information we need to discuss. I'm done paying lawyers to be intimidated by a man with an old deed." She pointed toward my farmhouse. "Pack what belongs to you and leave." I looked at the deputy. "Do you have a court order?" Before he could answer, Karen snapped. "He doesn't need one. This man is occupying HOA, property without authorization." The deputy frowned. "That's not how removal works." Karen stared at him. "Then call your sheriff." Right on cue, another vehicle turned onto the gravel road. Karen smiled. Finally, Sheriff Thomas Hale stepped out. Karen hurried toward him. "Sheriff, thank God. We've been dealing with this for weeks." She pointed at me. "That man is a squatter. His deadline expired this morning. I want him removed." Hale followed her finger, then stopped. He took off his sunglasses. "Judge Bennett?" Karen's smile disappeared. Hale walked past her and shook my hand. "Good morning, Judge." "Morning, Tom." Nobody spoke. Karen looked at me, then at her attorneys. "Judge?" The attorney who had called me answered. Judge Bennett served 27 years on the county circuit court. For a moment, Karen looked stunned. Then the arrogance came back. "I don't care if he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." She pulled the 1988 agreement from her folder. "A robe doesn't erase a recorded easement." I nodded. "You're right, that caught her off guard." "Excuse me, being a judge doesn't make this property mine." Karen glanced at the board members. "Exactly." I opened my binder. "The deed does." I handed Sheriff Hale the 1926 deed, then the current ownership record, then book 214, page 73. Finally, I handed him the agreement Karen had been waving around. Page 4. Hale read it. Karen folded her arms. "You can see the Bennett family granted access." "Yes," she smiled. "Thank you." Hale kept reading. Then his eyes stopped. "Upon completion, rights terminate." Karen's smile faded. "That clause doesn't mean what he's claiming." One of her attorneys stepped forward. "Actually, Karen, that's exactly what we've been trying to tell you." She turned on him. "You work for me." "No. Our firm represents the association." One of the board members looked at Karen. I pulled out the ownership search. "Hawthorne Ridge ordered this 8 months ago." I handed it to Hale. "My name is listed as owner." Then I showed him Karen's certification. 6 months later, Karen signed this and told the county her HOA controlled the same land. The board member stared at her. "You told us his title was unclear." Karen's face flushed. "This is a civil dispute." It was. I held up her certification until you started putting things in writing. Sheriff Hale handed the documents back to me. "Miss Whitmore, I see no court order authorizing anyone to remove Judge Bennett." Karen started to speak. Hale continued, "Until a court or county authority says otherwise, you and everyone with you need to leave his property." Karen stared at me. "This isn't over." "No," I closed the binder. "Because next time we're not doing this at my gate." She narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" I held up her certification. "The county wants to know why you signed this." For the first time, Karen looked uncertain. She still thought the fight was between her and me. It wasn't anymore, because the homeowners whose money she'd spent were about to see the same documents I had. 12 days later, Karen sat across from me at the county planning hearing. Nearly 60 Hawthorne Ridge homeowners filled the room. The developer had sent its attorney and project manager. Several HOA board members sat separately from Karen. I brought one binder. The planning commissioner looked at her. "Miss Whitmore, did Hawthorne Ridge control the Bennett property when you submitted the Phase 4 application?" Karen leaned toward the microphone. This was a complicated boundary misunderstanding. At my gate, I had been a squatter. Now it was a misunderstanding. The commissioner repeated the question. Did the HOA control the property? Karen's attorney whispered something. We believed we had legal access. I opened my binder. May I clarify something? The commissioner nodded. I placed the ownership search on the table. This report was ordered by Hawthorne Ridge 8 months before Ms. Whitmore came onto my property. I pointed to one line, owner of record, Daniel R. Bennett. Then I placed Karen's certification beside it. 6 months later, she signed this. The room went quiet. I looked at Karen. Do you remember telling me you never sign property documents until your attorneys verify ownership? Her attorney shifted in his chair. Karen hesitated. Yes. Then your attorneys verified this ownership report before you signed the certification? She stared at me. There was no good answer. If her attorneys had verified it, she knew I was the owner. If they hadn't, she had signed the certification without verifying ownership. The developer's attorney stood. Our client relied on that certification when it spent money preparing Phase 4. Karen turned toward him. You had your own lawyers, and your HOA represented that it controlled the access corridor. Voices rose behind her. Then Frank Miller stood. I'd met him twice before. Both times, he'd suggested I should cooperate with Karen rather than fight the association. Now he was staring at her. You told us Bennett didn't have clear title. Karen turned around. Frank, sit down? No. The room went silent. You spent our dues fighting him. Frank, you called him a squatter when you already had a report saying he owned the land. Sit down. That was the moment Karen lost the room. Not when Sheriff Hale called me judge. Not when the easement collapsed. Right there. Because the people she claimed to represent stopped believing her. The county suspended Phase 4 that afternoon. 3 days later, the developer withdrew. The HOA board ordered an independent review of the legal expenses and planning documents. Karen was removed as president before the month ended. Every violation against my property was withdrawn. The $18,600 demand disappeared, and Hawthorne Ridge issued a written acknowledgement that my 97 acres had never been part of the HOA. 2 months later, I was replacing a board on my cedar gate when Sheriff Hale pulled into the driveway. He nodded toward Miller Creek. The new HOA board had installed a sign on their side. Hawthorne Ridge boundary private property beyond this point. Hale laughed. Think they'll remember the boundary this time? I tightened the final screw on my own sign. Bennett Family Land Est, 1926 private property. They don't have to remember it. I looked across the creek. They just have to respect it.